first.
Senator, do you have any response? There are new allegations made by the federal prosecutors in the case against Senator Menendez, saying that he may have accepted bribes both from the Qatari government and the Egyptian government.
As I've said before, Senator Menendez, his behavior as reported in these indictments is way below the standard of a senator, and it's deeply disappointing and disturbing to me.
How long are you willing to? How long are you willing to wait for this border deal before you consider other options for the supplemental? Is there a hard stop date?
Look, getting a border is very important, and right now, because our Republican colleagues have tied it to Ukraine, Israel, Indo-Pacific, and aid to Gaza, we want to get the border deal done, and we want to get it all done as a package. That's what we're trying to get done. Last one.
All right, Colleen, you want to reset us?
Yes.
Okay, so on Senator Menendez yesterday, does the president believe that the senator should have any access to sensitive information given the gravity of the allegations against him? And
Look, as you just said, this is serious. The situation is very serious, and we have said that many times before. We think it is important, right, that he did indeed step down from the chairmanship. I'm just not going to get beyond that. I want to be really careful here. But again, we see this as very serious, and we think that it's the right thing to do that he stepped down from his chair.
As the leader of the party, should the president be calling for the senator's resignation in general?
Just not going to get beyond what I just said. And what we believe as far as anything else, whether it's resigning or anything else that's related to Senator Menendez and his role and him as a senator, obviously, in Congress, that's something for the Senate leadership to decide.
Okay. And then on the school shooting in Iowa, I wondered if you could talk about anything the White House has upcoming on gun safety or gun control, and what more can the White House be doing this year as we're looking at another shooting?
Look, and I stated in the top how we're just a couple of days in, right? We're just a couple of days into the new year, and we're talking about another shooting, and that is heart-wrenching and that is heartbreaking. And as I stated at the top, enough is enough. And we're going to continue certainly to call on Congress to act. Obviously, Congress did act in a bipartisan way, passing the first comprehensive piece of anti-gun violence legislation that the president signed. And so we are happy that we got there, and the president obviously has taken more action than any president in his first 2 years, signing more than 24 executive orders to deal with this epidemic that is the #1 killer of our kids. And so, look, we have to keep doing the work. And what I can say is just last month, we hosted the largest ever White House convening of state legislators to discuss actions that they can take to end this epidemic of gun violence. And so we also announced the Safer States initiative to drive additional progress from investments in gun crime prevention and intervention to common sense laws to keep guns out of dangerous hands. And so we're going to keep doing that. And this is, again, this is a president that has taken unprecedented action here. We're always going to look for other ways to deal with this. We've started, obviously created the first anti-gun violence office, which is incredibly important. It's helping communities it's going to help communities like the community in Iowa, but also we also have to implement these more than 24 executive actions that the president signed into law.
Mr. President, I come to the Senate floor to respond to a series of accusations raised by the United States Attorney of the Southern District of New York. First, I would note that this is the second superseding indictment brought forth by the government. It should be noted that all of the information presented in the superseding indictments were fully available to the government since the beginning of this process. And for that, at least a year prior to the bringing of this indictment. Which therefore begs the question, why did the government not proceed with all of these accusations from the beginning? The answer is clear to me. By filing 3 indictments, one in late September, a second one a few weeks later in mid-October, and a third one just last week in early January, it allows the government to keep the sensational story in the press, it poisons the jury pool, and it seeks to convict me in the court of public opinion. In so doing, the government's tactics harm not just me, but each of you, my colleagues, the political establishment, and most importantly, the electorate of New Jersey. The sensationalized allegations are now creating a rising call for my resignation, despite my innocence, and before a single piece of evidence has even been introduced in a court of law. The United States Attorney's Office is engaged not in a prosecution, but a persecution. They seek a victory, not justice. We've seen this play out with other prosecutions of public officers. Remember what happened to Senator Ted Stevens or Governor Bob McDonnell. There are numerous other examples. It's an unfortunate reality, but prosecutors sometimes shoot first before they even know all the facts. It would be a shame if this venerable body does the same. So having set the stage for why this process has unfolded this way, let me deal with some of the issues, starting with the latest accusation. I have received nothing, absolutely nothing, from the government of Qatar or on behalf of the government of Qatar to promote their image or their issues. The government's principal allegation of what I supposedly did for Qatar was to support a Senate resolution. This resolution was sponsored and introduced by Senator Graham and co-sponsored by 11 other bipartisan senators, posted on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee agenda, and passed by voice vote. Now, what was that resolution about? The resolution, sponsored by Senator Graham and 12 of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, thanked the Qatari government for assisting the United States military in evacuating American citizens and Afghan refugees from Taliban rule. How nefarious is that? Then they referenced some press release I made. Well, the press release says in one sentence, "I am glad to see our friends and allies in Qatar be moral exemplars by accepting Afghans ultimately seeking safe haven in the United States after being forced to escape for their lives." That's the one thing it says about Qatar. The rest of it is a call for international cooperation to help protect Afghan civil society members, journalists, and others at risk of Taliban rule, something I've heard many members of the Senate at the time speak out for. Qatar has played important roles in hosting our U.S. Al Udeid Air Force Base, the largest in the Middle East, in responding to the administration's call to supply natural gas to Europe during the Ukrainian conflict with Russia, and yes, facilitating and receiving Afghan refugees that the United States government was seeking to evacuate, among other initiatives. And most recently, they played a role in brokering the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. Now, like any other country, there are things that we disagree on. During the World Cup preparations, the question of labor violations took center stage. Qatar's engagement with its next-door neighbor, Iran, and with Hamas have all been points of contention. And I have criticized Qatar, as I have any other country, when I felt they were falling short of their international obligations, and applauded them when they have led in ways the United States and the world would commend. That give and take, that carrot and stick, that cajoling and rewarding is the essence of diplomacy. It is a job we all partake in every day as part of our duties in the Senate. The government seeks to use baseless conjecture, not facts, to create the connective tissue to substantiate the allegations. They show a picture of watches, but no proof of receiving any such gift. They talk about tickets to a state-sponsored event, but as we all know, members of the Senate often attend state-sponsored events. Indeed, I've seen members of the State Department, the administration, and yes, even the Justice Department attend state-sponsored events. The government fails to mention that the family member referenced to already had their own purchased tickets to the event. That's not a perk, and certainly not a bribe. Finally, on this point, the suggestion that an introduction of a constituent to a Qatari investment company is illegal is not only wrong as a matter of law, it is dangerous to the important work all of us as senators do. Under the government's theory, it may be a crime for members of the Senate to make introductions to companies and constituents in their own state, to foster investments in their state, investments that create jobs and rateables and revenues and help grow the economy. Indeed, if that is a crime, then advocating for Boeing aircraft to be purchased by a foreign government, attracting a foreign chip manufacturer to your state, getting a country to buy agricultural products from your state, making technology investments, and so many other actions that members of the Congress take to attract investment and economic opportunity to their states would now be a crime. Now let me turn to the government's other outrageous accusation of conspiring to act as a foreign agent for the government of Egypt. This is an unprecedented accusation, and it has never, ever been levied against a sitting member of Congress. Never. And for good reason. It opens a dangerous door for the Justice Department to take the normal engagement of members of Congress with a foreign government and to transform those engagements into a charge of being a foreign agent for that government. I want to address the accusations as they relate to me, but I don't want you to lose sight of how dangerous this precedent will be to all of you. Let me start by describing my history of taking adverse positions to the government of Egypt, my defense of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in that country, and my stinging criticism of the violations of human rights, democracy, and rule of law issues in Egypt. One fact is indisputable. Throughout my time in Congress, I have remained steadfast on the side of civil society and human rights defenders in Egypt and everywhere else in the world. If you look at my actions related to Egypt during the period described in the indictment and throughout my career, my record is clear and consistent in holding Egypt accountable for its unjust detention of American and Egyptian citizens, its human rights abuses, its deepening relationship with Russia, and efforts that would have eroded the independence of the nation's judiciary, among other concerns. In 2017, I led the writing of a bipartisan letter to President Trump expressing grave concern with the worsening situation for human rights and civil society in Egypt. That same year, I sent a letter to the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee supporting U.S. assistance to Egypt as long as Egypt adheres to the Camp David Accords, and urged the Appropriations Committee to include the requirements for assistance reform strategies outlined in the Egypt Assistance Reform Act of 2013. In 2018, I urged Secretary of State Tillerson to focus more on human rights issues in Egypt and raise concerns that the electoral environment ahead of Egypt's elections at that time were not fair, free, or credible. In 2019, I met President el-Sisi, along with members of the Senate, at the Munich Security Conference and pressed him on the level of repression inside of Egypt, warning him that it risked eroding our security cooperation and raised concerns at that time about Egypt's intention to purchase a Russian missile system. In 2020, I spoke on the Senate floor for International Women's Day and cited the cases of Mahinur el-Masri, a human rights lawyer, and Ezra Abdel Fattah, a human rights activist and reporter, who were unjustly detained in Egypt for fighting for human rights, democracy, and a free press. Does any of this sound like I was on the take with Egypt? Of course not. But that's not all. In 2021, during this very time period that this indictment alleges I was an agent of Egypt, I placed a hold on $1.58 billion in foreign military funding to Egypt, M1A1's tank fleet, and $125 million in economic security funds. I placed that hold based on concerns I had with reference to the worsening human rights situation in Egypt and the harassment and detention of activists in general, including the detention or harassment of family members in Egypt of activists currently living in the United States. In the fall of 2021, I took an official trip to Egypt, where I forcefully raised all of these issues directly with President el-Sisi in the presence of our United States ambassador to Egypt, as well as staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The government references this trip in its indictment, but tellingly fails to state what actually occurred and how I confronted President el-Sisi, which they know. The omission intentionally leaves a bad and unfair impression. most recently on a congressional delegation trip to Egypt in August of 2023, led by Senator Graham, along with 9 fellow senators and 2 House members, I once again challenged President el-Sisi on these and other issues in the presence of my colleagues and U.S. Embassy personnel. Each and every time, I raised issues of arbitrary arrests and detentions, violations of human rights, disbanding of non-governmental organizations, and other issues in a direct challenge to President el-Sisi. Now, again, when Egypt has acted in concert with U.S. interests and values, like fighting terrorism in the Sinai, or its peaceful relations with Israel, or working to improve the rights of Coptic Christians to worship as they please, I have commended Egypt's actions. But you can't challenge the leader of an authoritarian state in public and among other members of Congress and take actions adverse to their interests and at the same time serve as an agent of that same foreign government. Over my 30 years of engaging in foreign policy, I don't know of any dictator or authoritarian leader who is willing to be publicly chastised or who regards someone who dares to do so as his agent. Which brings me to the danger of what the Justice Department has created by charging a sitting member of Congress with acting as a foreign agent. The relevant FARA statute's definition of agent is broad. It includes anyone who engages in, quote, political activities, publicity services, or other certain acts at the order, request, or under the direction or control of a foreign principal. Applied to members of Congress, it covers anything that could in any way influence any agency or official of the United States or any section of the public within the United States as to public policy. So, when members of the Senate from agricultural states went to communist Cuba to sell rice or poultry or sugar or beef, and were told by the Castro regime that they would consider doing so, but that the senators needed to convince the U.S. administration to change U.S. law and lift the embargo and permit credit to take place for such sales, and then came back to the United States and advocated for exactly that request. Did that make him a foreign agent of Cuba? I think not. When senators travel to Israel and hear from their elected leaders requesting greater economic and defense assistance or for the replenishment of Iron Dome, did their advocacy upon return make them a foreign agent of Israel? I think not. When senators traveled to the Middle East in pursuit of engaging countries to become part of the Abraham Accords and heard from Saudi Arabia that a civilian nuclear program, a mutual defense agreement, and technology transfers might be prerequisites for Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, and then they came back to the Senate to advocate for that, were they foreign agents of the Saudi government? I think not. What if any of these examples, that country bought rice or sugar or meat from your state? What if that country purchased Boeing aircraft made in your state? Would that be a quid pro quo? What if you got contributions to your campaign from U.S. entities or individuals associated with those countries? Would that be a quid pro quo? For the government, the sky is the limit if they want to pursue you. What a chilling effect on the mere engagement of these conversations and inquiries would it be if the sum of those actions, taken in pursuit of your fact-finding effort to inform you of what your legislative actions should be, can be turned into official acts in violation of the law and not within the protection of the speech or debate clause of the Constitution. Now, some may be alarmed by what I've described, but in this case explain it in a way by saying, but in this case there are allegations of cash and gold bars. The problem is that there is no evidence of the giving or receiving of cash and gold bars. In fact, there has been and will be at trial a full explanation of what is the truth about those issues, a truth that proves I am entirely innocent of the charges. And that is the problem. Almost everyone, including my friends in the press who have reported on it, haven't read the indictment. They've only taken the government's sensational narrative of what the accusations are as truth. They haven't sought facts of the allegations. I'm innocent, and I intend to prove my innocence. Not just for me, but for the precedent this case will set for you and future members of the Senate. I am, however, alarmed that the greatest and most ardent defenders of the Constitution in this body are among the most vociferous in calling for my resignation. They would deny me due process and undermine the fundamental principle of our law that in America, you are innocent until proven otherwise by a jury of your peers. Now, members of the Senate are not above the law, though they are not beneath it either. If for political expediency an indictment and its accusations are now tantamount to guilt, we have upended our system of justice in America. And when the next person or group of persons are wrongfully accused, you will not be able to claim that the constitutional guarantees of due process and innocence and proven guilty need to be observed. Now, some say that a U.S. Senator answers to a higher standard. But even then, the question of whether that standard has been violated depends not on accusations, but proof of guilt after being afforded due process beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, let me say that I understand how the government's accusations, made in the most sensational and purposely damning way possible, its misuse of the grand jury system to bring superseding indictments, even though it had all the information they alleged from the beginning, can be a source of concern and contempt by some of my colleagues, the political establishment, and most importantly, the people of New Jersey. I get it. And I am suffering greatly as a result of what they have done. After 50 years of public service, this is not how I wanted to celebrate my Golden Jubilee. But I have never violated the public trust. I have been a patriot for and of my country. Now, let me close by saying I understand some of my colleagues are in tough races, and for them this was a political calculation. Let me also say that for the administration, the political establishment, and for my detractors, it would be much easier to have me exit the scene so that an unjust deal in immigration that won't really solve our problems at the border, but that would hurt the Latino community, would be easier to be achieved, or that a new deal with Iran would be more possible, or cozying up to the Castro regime could take place, or selling F-16s to Turkey could be finalized. I get it. But I will not step aside and allow those things to happen in the name of political expediency. I have never chosen the easy path. Never have, never will, and will not do so now. I simply ask for justice to be allowed to work its way. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and observe the absence of a quorum.
Menendez
went to the Senate floor today, forcefully denied the allegations against him, and said the government is trying to manipulate the media, poison the jury pool. What's your thoughts?
Oh, I know. Yeah, he's a victim. Yeah, he's a victim. But hey, I've been calling for that sleazeball has to go, and I don't know why we have to get rid of Santos, and we would keep somebody like him around.
He accused his colleagues, I guess that would include yourself, who called on him to resign or to leave Congress, of acting politically. What do you say to his accusation?
No, I think it's my aversion to gold bars in your mattress and over $500,000 stuffed around your house, and changing your mind about, hey, which $24,000 watch am I going to get? It's just strange. And now when you're polling at 4%, why are you hanging around at this point? You have no future. But I can't imagine why we can keep him around.
He said that this would chill standard engagement with foreign governments from members of Congress, that if someone wants to work with Israel to try to refresh the Iron Dome, that's no different than what he's doing. That was his implication on the Senate floor.
He shouldn't be on the floor of the Senate. Shouldn't be giving a speech about anything. You know, he should be at home back in New Jersey and working about his trial and his defense. I don't know why he's even. Who's paying attention to him at this point?
Do you think some senators, because this is a custom in the Senate, kind of close ranks regardless of party, regardless of how they really feel, because when somebody gets in trouble.
I don't-
They're like, you know, there we go, but for the grace of God.
I don't speak for anybody else or whatever, but I can't been very clear. It's people in Congress decided that we have to expel Santos, and they did that. And somebody that is more accused of much more severe and sinister things, and now he's now been accused of being a foreign agent for now two nations in the Middle East. What's he still doing here? It's bizarre to me.
Some Democrats. We had three great senators, and now we're ready for some questions. Way down there. You got to talk a little louder. Well, look, I've always said that when people attempt to courts or legislators take away voting rights, particularly of the most disenfranchised people, we have an obligation to do everything we can to restore those voting rights. Yes?
Senator Menendez is facing another round of indictments. Is it time for him to resign? If it's not time yet, what will it take?
Look, the bottom line, as I've said, the Senate has certain standards that we must live up to. I am very disappointed that Senator Menendez has not lived up to those standards.
But why are you okay with him serving in your caucus, sitting on committees, attending classes, briefings, where he's been charged with bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice?
As I've said, the Senate has standards. We should all be living up to those standards. I'm deeply disappointed that Senator Menendez has not. Yes.
I know your position on Israel, but based on some of the heat that the president is getting from the left and the Democratic Party, if he pivots in his State of the Union address tomorrow night, does that change things the way the Democrats perceive? Is that something he needs to do?
I'm not speculating on what the president should say in the State of the Union, except to say he will show what good, strong shape America is in. Yes. Well, as you know, many of the bills we've passed are bipartisan, and of the big bills we passed in 2022, they were bipartisan, and we're going to work very hard on many different things. We want to get insulin for $5 for everybody. We want to work on making sure that health care is improved. We believe very strongly in so many things, and we are going to continue to work on the agenda that we put before us. We first have to fund the government. The supplemental is very important, but after that you will see us turn to many of the bills that we passed, the SAFER Act, safety on the rails, recoup, so many other things. Last one.
Subject, Robert Menendez, you reappointed him last month to the Senate National Security Working Group as staff in the budget. Why was it appropriate to reappoint him, given the
As I said, the Senate has certain standards that every senator must live up to. Senator Menendez has not. I am deeply disappointed in him. Thank you, everybody.
It's going to take a bit. Thank you.
Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start off as someone who understands being falsely accused. I believe that due process, at the minimum, requires notice, due notice and time, and an opportunity to be heard. And so to the extent that we're going to challenge, which is perfectly legitimate, nominees, having notice so that a fulsome answer to any of those issues could be had is something that I would hope that the committee would make as its practice. Now, let me say that I regret to say that I have a strong objection to Ms. Taylor's nomination, because the State Department will be getting a damn good legal advisor. And since I know that legal advisors can often create challenges for the interests of the committee as it relates to meeting things that they want from the State Department, I wish she was on this side of the ledger, even though we have a great counsel here at the committee than there, but I know she will do an extraordinary job. I do hope that as part of that extraordinary job, you'll remember the obligations under the CASE Act to this committee, and that you will advise the department appropriately. Do I have your commitment on that?
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm interested in all these nominees, but I only have limited time, so I'll submit some questions for the record. But let me focus on Mr. Woodhouse, because as the architect and author of many of the sanctions that you will be called upon to coordinate for the State Department, I want to pursue some with you.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing, guys? How do you plan to plead today, sir?
Senator, are you guilty?
Senator, any comments? Senator, can you tell us your reaction today?
Are you running again? Are you going to run next week?
Senator, have you ruled out running as an independent?
Gentlemen.
Senator Menendez?
We need to get into the car, guys. We need to get into the car. We don't want anybody to get hurt. Please don't fall over anybody, okay?
Guys, move out of the way. Guys, move out of the way. There's got to be a better way to be able to come in and out of court.
Hello, this is Senator Bob Menendez. For the last 19 years, I've had the honor and privilege of representing you in the United States Senate. During those years, we faced some enormous challenges: the Great Recession of 2007, Superstorm Sandy in 2012, and a once-in-a-century pandemic in 2020. Together, we faced adversity and came out stronger. And through it all, I was a fighter for New Jersey. When the Great Recession hit in 2007, I co-authored the American Recovery and Investment Act, a stimulus package that helped New Jersey with its $9 billion shortfall and New Jersey businesses and families get back on their feet. New Jersey received $3.6 billion in combined tax relief for families, education assistance, and infrastructure investment. It was a stimulus that brought us out of recession 2 years later. Then Superstorm Sandy hit in 2012. We suffered the worst natural disaster in New Jersey's history, $30 billion in losses in the lives of 38 New Jerseyans. Many were left out of their homes and businesses. After the storm, I went to work and successfully fought in the Senate to get $60 billion in recovery money. I had to challenge senators from other states who didn't believe New Jersey needed the money. But I reminded them how we had supported recovery aid in many of their states. After all, this is the United States of America. And in the end, we prevailed. As we were recovering from a natural disaster, we faced a man-made one, the denial of flood insurance claims by FEMA. I held hearings as a member of the Senate Banking Committee and got FEMA to reopen cases that helped New Jerseyans get more than $240 million in flood insurance payouts that FEMA had previously denied. And when FEMA created rate shock by dramatically increasing flood insurance rates, I authored bipartisan legislation that passed into law, capping flood insurance rates for New Jersey. After the storm, when the cameras were gone, I was still standing alongside New Jerseyans to get them back in their homes. COVID, a once-in-a-century pandemic, struck in 2020. Over 35,000 New Jerseyans died. Many more were sick. Hospitals were struggling to meet the unexpected challenge. Businesses were closing. State, county, and local governments' budgets were decimated, and many New Jerseyans were unemployed. As a senior member of the Senate Finance and Banking Committees, I helped write the American Rescue Plan and CARES Act that delivered well over $30 billion in a combination of direct stimulus payments to New Jersey families, extended unemployment benefits, provided school aid, and $265 million to New Jersey hospitals and federally qualified health centers. Under a provision I wrote, $10 billion was delivered to New Jersey's state, county, and local governments. And when New Jersey hospitals, doctors, and nurses didn't have the personal protective equipment they needed, I fought for them to get what they needed. It was a dark period, but together we got through this once-in-a-century curse. Along the way, we also had great achievements that were not born of adversity. Through my work on the Senate Finance Committee, I'm proud to have been one of the authors of the Affordable Care Act that brought health insurance for over 340,000 New Jerseyans, eliminated discrimination based on pre-existing conditions for all of our citizens, and eliminated lifetime caps on all insurance. I also helped open, preserve, and enhance dozens of federally qualified health centers that provide for over 2 million patient visits each year. We also capped the price of insulin under Medicare, cut out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs of seniors, and are capping the cost of some of the most expensive drugs. And at a time in which women's reproductive health are under assault, I'm proud of my 100% lifetime ratings from national women's organizations on behalf of the right to choose. I'm proud of my environmental record that also received 100% ratings from national organizations, recognizing my work to ensure we bequeath to the next generation a better environment. I'm also proud of the federal dollars we brought home for our police and firefighters to make our communities safer under the COPS program and the SAFER Act, and to deliver federal education dollars so that our public schools could be among the finest in the nation. I successfully fought for justice for 9/11 families and victims of terrorism. I fought for common sense gun safety laws, voting for universal background checks, an assault weapons ban, and I sponsored the ban on high-capacity magazines. I worked to improve the health benefits of our veterans and the pay of our men and women serving in our armed forces. I led the way to help create, preserve, and fund Gateway, a once-in-a-generation transportation project to build new rail tunnels under the Hudson River that will create high-paying construction and engineering jobs, explode economic potential in our region, and improve our air quality. And when a previous administration tried to kill the project, I kept it alive, and now it's on its way to being fully funded. I've never backed down from a fight worth having. Where others have run away from the issue of immigration or used it purely for political gain, I have been an unwavering champion for real solutions to our broken immigration system, ones that fix the problem without scapegoating those who, like my parents, came to this country seeking freedom and a better life. When tragedy struck one of our federal judges, whose son was slain at their home by a disgruntled defendant, I made a promise that it wouldn't happen again, because our system of justice requires that judges make decisions without fear of how they will decide. I passed the Daniel Anderl Judicial Security and Privacy Act into law to ensure that federal judges' personal information is protected. Along the way, we've helped thousands of New Jerseyans get their passport renewals in the nick of time to go to a family wedding or vacation, help get veterans the benefits and recognition they deserve, taxpayer refunds from the IRS, and even help save the lives of some of our residents. An example of that was the case of an Egg Harbor City resident who needed to undergo a kidney transplant operation, but could not get the perfect match from her mother, who lived in the Republic of Georgia. The family applied for visas multiple times, but were repeatedly rejected by the State Department. As a result of my efforts, we got her mother a humanitarian parole, and the transplant was successfully completed. And there's so much more. It has been an honor of a lifetime to represent you in the United States Senate. If you told me growing up poor in a tenement in Union City, the son of refugees, the first of my family to go to college, that I could grow up to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 330 million people, well, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But it is the promise of America fulfilled. It's that history and that promise for the future that I would want to bring to a re-election for the United States Senate. Unfortunately, the present accusations I am facing, of which I am innocent and will prove so, will not allow me to have that type of dialogue and debate with political opponents that have already made it the cornerstone of their campaign. New Jerseyans deserve better than that. You deserve to hear from those who wish to represent you about what they would do for you and your families in the future. Therefore, I will not file for the Democratic primary this June. I am hopeful that my exoneration will take place this summer and allow me to pursue my candidacy as an independent Democrat in the general election. This would allow me the time to not only remind New Jerseyans of how I've succeeded in being your champion, but how we will secure our financial futures, meet the challenges of raising a family, owning a home, provide for a college education, and secure a more peaceful world for all of us to live in. I know many of you are hurt and disappointed in me with the accusations I'm facing. Believe me, I am disappointed at the false accusations as well. All I can ask of you is to withhold judgment until justice takes place. Until then, I will continue to work my heart out each and every day, as I have for the past 19 years, to fight for New Jersey, for you, your family, and a more prosperous, secure future. May God bless you, and may He continue to bless these United States of America.
Leader McConnell.
Burgess? Yeah, if Senator Menendez is convicted at his trial, do you think the Senate should move to expel him?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Should Senator Menendez be expelled if he's convicted at his trial?
Yeah, look, I'm really glad he's not a Republican.
Senator McConnell, as Manu mentioned, Speaker Johnson was in front of the courthouse yesterday defending the presumptive GOP nominee. Is it important to see the Senate GOP leader up there as well?
Well, I can speak for myself with regard to who may have attended the trial. You'll have to ask them.
But is it important for you to visit?
You'll have to. They don't work for me. I wish it were that easy.
Leader McConnell, in this Republican-led bill to try and
Ya hemos oído esta mentira una vez, lo estamos oyendo por seguro. The government is intoxicated with their own rhetoric. They spent 2 hours on charts, not witnesses that came before the jury, on charts. 2 hours telling jurors about what they should believe conversation should be that they never heard. That's pretty
¿Qué va a decir el cierre de la defensa, senador? Por favor.
Placed before the Senate a certificate of appointment to fill the unexpired term created by the resignation of former Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey. The certificate, the chair is advised, is in the form suggested by the Senate. Hearing no objection, the reading of the certificate will be waived and it will be printed full in the record. If the senator designate will now present himself at the desk, the chair will administer the oath of office. Your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the same, that you will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter? So help you God.
I do. Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations.